actually want to read something to you from the film Aaron Brockovich. And it goes on to say, you know, the money never makes the people whole. We're missing the mark here.
Hey, y'all, thanks for stopping in. So I got one here from thedailymail.com. Norfolk Southern agrees to pay $600 million in settlement related to the train derailment in eastern Ohio. That was East Palestine, Ohio. The train derailment that happened a little over a year ago, where seemingly Norfolk Southern, maybe in conjunction with the government, burned up the evidence before anybody could find out what happened. And the local people there have been suffering ever since. It's one of the first stories I covered on my channel here, and I vowed to not let these people be forgotten. Here we finally have some news, an update, possibly good news. It just depends on how thin this $600 million gets spread, you know, how many people are going to actually be receiving it. And as we heard in the intro, Aaron Brockovich claims that, you know, no amount will ever be enough. But I just wonder what really would be the amount that is truly enough. Let's go ahead and check out the article here. Norfolk Southern has agreed to pay $600 million in a class action lawsuit settlement related to a fiery train derailment in February 2023 in eastern Ohio. The company said the agreement, if approved by the court, will resolve all class action claims within a 20-mile radius from the derailment, and for those residents who chose to participate, personal injury claims within a 10-mile radius from the derailment. About 50 cars from the freight train, which had roughly 150 cars and 3 locomotives, derailed on the outskirts of East Palestine near the Pennsylvania state line, with some cars transporting hazardous material. An evacuation covered 1,500 to 2,000 of the town's approximately 4,900 residents. Norfolk Southern said Tuesday that individuals and businesses will be able to use the compensation from the settlement in any manner they see fit to address potential adverse impacts from the derailment, which could include healthcare needs, property restoration, and compensation for any net business loss. Individuals within 10 miles of the derailment may, at their discretion, choose to receive additional compensation for any past, current, or future personal injury from the derailment. You know, I find it curious in there that there's no mention of compensation for relocation. It seems like they're trying to make sure that these people stay in place, and possibly, my guess is, that's because the property value has been driven down so far that nobody's going to want to move to this town. And for one reason or another, the government, the railroad, maybe both, need this town to stay occupied and functioning. And who better than the local people who have been stuck there for the past 13, 14 months, you know, post the derailment? Because if it was me, I would have moved out of there immediately, wouldn't you? I mean, I understand not everybody can just pick up and leave, especially, you know, in the wake of a disaster, but you'd have to imagine quite a few people did leave. And is there compensation for those folks and the cost involved with that? I don't know. Let's read more, see what else we can find out. The company said that the settlement doesn't include or constitute any admission of liability, wrongdoing, or fault. Okay, right? A $600 million compensation just for nothing, you know, I mean, just keep it off the books, I guess. I don't know. That's so so obviously not the case, but whatever. The settlement is expected to be submitted for preliminary approval to the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of Ohio later in April 2024. Payments to class members under the settlement could begin by the end of the year, subject to final court approval. So by the time these folks are subject to getting paid, they're going to be in the town for nearly 2 full years. I mean, at that point, if you stayed there that long, you might as well just stick around and rebuild, or that's what you've been doing for 2 years already. I don't know. And for the ones that weren't able to get out of there, you know, maybe they've been looking forward to this compensation to where they can finally, you know, uproot and go somewhere else and start their lives over in a place that hasn't possibly been contaminated. Norfolk Southern has already spent more than $1.1 billion on its response to the derailment, including more than $104 million in district aid to East Palestine and its residents, partly because Norfolk Southern is paying for the cleanup. President Joe Biden has never declared a disaster in East Palestine, which is a sore point for many residents. You know, and that's on the heels. just if you remember last week, or was it earlier this week? Yeah, 3 days ago, there was this eclipse that crossed over the United States, and a bunch of towns in the middle of nowhere essentially were declaring emergency or declaring themselves, for an emergency or whatever. But yet Biden won't declare a disaster here in East Palestine. Ironic. The plaintiff's attorneys said the deal is the result of a year of intense investigation of the derailment and should provide meaningful relief to residents. Well, yeah, it absolutely should. And it's a shame that it's taken even this long to start getting cash in these people's hands. And it sounds like they're still going to have to wait till the end of the year before they can actually even get that. Meanwhile, Norfolk Southern and whoever else is involved is spending tens of millions, hundreds of millions on attorneys alone. I mean, you'd have to assume part of that 1.1 billion is quite a bit in attorney fees and things trying to fight on their behalf rather than just admitting that something bad went wrong and paying whatever it costs to make these people whole again. I mean, it's not like they're going to shut your train business down. You're Norfolk Southern. I don't know. It's just weird. And we have a quote here. This resolution comes shortly after the 1-year anniversary of the disaster and will provide substantial compensation to all affected residents, property owners, employees, and businesses residing, owning, or otherwise having a legal interest in property, working, owning or operating a business for damages resulting from the derailment and release of chemicals, said a bunch of lawyers, right? The railroad also announced preliminary first quarter earnings of 23 cents per share Tuesday to reflect the impact of the settlement. Railroad CEO Alan Shaw, who is fighting for his job against an activist investor who wants to overhaul the railroad's operations, said Norfolk Southern is, quote, becoming a more productive and efficient railroad. There is still more work to be done to achieve industry competitive margins. The railroad said, even though volume was up 4% during the quarter, its revenue fell by 4% because of lower fuel surcharge revenue and changes in the mix of shipments it handled. Ancora Holdings is trying to persuade investors to support its nominees for Norfolk Southern's board at the railroad's May 9th annual meeting. Last week, federal officials said the aftermath of the train derailment doesn't qualify as a public health emergency because widespread health problems and ongoing chemical exposures haven't been documented. Well, that's a cop-out in my opinion, considering we don't know what the long-term effects of this could be. I mean, in 20 years, every person in this town could suddenly need to file a report, but there's nothing, yet. So making that distinction after such a short time, and I say short time because it's relative to, health effects, you know what I mean? Things affecting your health over time. But, hopefully the widespread effects are minimal, honestly. But we just want to make sure that there's compensation in place for folks just in case, right? So, continuing, the Environmental Protection Agency never approved that designation after the February 23 Norfolk Southern derailment, even though the disaster forced the evacuation of half the town of East Palestine and generated many fears about potential long-term health consequences of the chemicals that spilled and burned. Yes, exactly. The contamination concerns were exacerbated by the decision to blow up 5 tank cars filled with vinyl chloride and burn that toxic chemical 3 days after the derailment. The head of the National Transportation Safety Board said recently that her agency's investigation showed that the vent and burn of the vinyl chloride was unnecessary because the company had produced that chemical, was sure no damage chemical reaction was happening inside the tank cars. But the officials who made the decision have said they were never told that, which is why some people think they were burning the evidence before anything could be determined and assessed and investigated. But continuing, the NTSB's full investigation into the cause of the derailment won't be complete until June, though that agency has said that an overheating wheel bearing on one of the rail cars that was detected in time by a trackside sensor likely caused the crash. And that's, was pretty much the public general consensus, considering there was a video of the train going by. I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say, 10 or 15 miles away. Don't quote me on that, but a decent distance away that was completely sparking and potentially on fire quite a few miles away, right? So unless there was some additional thing that maybe caused that to go out, the general consensus was that the bearing essentially did eventually cause that wreck. So the EPA has said the cleanup in East Palestine is expected to be complete sometime later this year. Shares of Norfolk Southern Corp, based in Atlanta, fell about 1.3% before the opening bell on Tuesday, which is something that we really don't care about. The value of their stock means nothing to the people who don't own any of the stock, for one, but additionally, to the people who just want to make sure that the people of East Palestine, Ohio, are taken care of properly and compensated. And to me, given the opportunity to skip town if they want and make a new life in a different town that hasn't had such a disaster happen in it. You know what I mean? So there you have it. That is the update on East Palestine, Ohio. But before I go, let me just pull up the calculator real fast and let's see just some tertiary numbers where 600 million divided by 5,000 people is about $120,000 per person. Just rough numbers. I don't know if that's going to be enough. And I get that it's not going to actually even be split equally between people. They mentioned businesses and compensation as far as other things that people had. And so that's all going to come out of that 600 million. I don't think that's enough, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. With that, I'm going to go ahead and check out. Thanks for stopping in. And if you appreciated this video, go ahead and hit that like button, please, and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.